Video lesson 4.1, Intro to West Africa. So we're going to build on our exploration of African geography that we did in class today and just touch a little bit on those West African kingdoms. So, what are some of the defining geographic characteristics of Africa? Africa is the second largest continent, second to Asia, and is home to 54 separate countries. So again, a continent is a landmass, so it is a piece of land that is organized together, and on that piece of land are different countries, which means they have different governments. So because of this, all these different countries and governments and people and ethnicities, and its great size, it is truly defined by its diversity culturally, religiously, linguistically, and politically. So here's what I think is kind of a cool map. So you can, what is done here is the actual size and shape of each of these countries is actually inlaid over Africa. So you can see how many different of the world's countries are fit into the continent of Africa. So you can see China's large size plus the United States. It's huge. This map shows the different kind of ethnic groups or linguistic groups that exist in Africa. So very diverse linguistically and ethnically. Here's just some pictures of modern Africa. So these might be similar to or different from what you usually think of when you think of Africa. And these are from all over Africa. So Cote d'Ivoire is in West Africa, Tunisia is in North Africa, so is Algeria, Ethiopia is in East Africa, Central African Republic is obviously in Central Africa. So you can see that it is developed, but some of it is still remains very undeveloped. And so historically thinking, we're going to look at how these cultures survived on these various geographic climates and how that impacted their culture and how that impacted their civilization's development. So the first thing, it is very diverse geographically. So these climate zones here got 40% about are the savanna. So if you're thinking about the Lion King, that's in the savanna. So that's this kind of lighter green area. Then about 40% is the desert, which is the Sahara Desert or Sahara Desert. So that makes up 40% of this entire continent. It's the largest desert in the world. Then we have 10% being made up of tropical rainforest right around the equator here. So that's typically what we think of when we think of the rainforest. And then we also have the mild zones, which are these yellow parts that are a little bit drier and more able to be farmed than the savanna or than the rainforest, but still just a very small portion of the country here.
Mr. Prejean, can you return to the...
Sorry about that. So this is again just a different map that shows the agricultural activities of Africa. So you can see that most of this is just rainforest. So they're farming enough to live, but not really farming to produce any sort of agriculture. So here we see kind of the same in that savanna area that I showed you before. Really the best farmland there. And then we can see kind of here there are just random spots known as oases that are desert spots of harvest, or of there's water around them so that plants and animals can survive. So these happen occasionally in the desert. So we can see up in the Sahara, that's where that's happening. All right, so we're going to focus on the political time period known as the medieval time period. And this is the first time we're formally introducing this word, although we have looked at it before. So anytime you see the word medieval, it refers to a time period of civilization between classical civilization and modern civilization, usually about 500 to 1500 CE. If you're familiar with the restaurant Medieval Times, you think of like knights and castles and horses and jousting and princes and princesses and kind of that fairy tale sort of thing, bows and arrows. That is the medieval time period of Europe. So the classical time period of Europe is the Romans. The medieval time period is that. And then the modern time period is obviously once we have the kind of more modern industrial progress and technology. So we're going to be looking at if we look down here at our timeline, you can see that we're looking at the Empire of Ghana, the Empire of Mali, and the empire of Songhai. So Songhai is kind of our latest one. We'll touch on that a bit. But the Ghana and Mali are really right in the thick of it in contemporary with the Arabian city-states, which we just learned about in our previous unit. So right in this time period between about 500 and 1500 CE right here. All right, so in West Africa, life was contingent upon the success of the trans-Sahara trade. Anytime you see the introduction of the word trans, that means across. So this is trading routes that went across the Sahara Desert. So gold, salt, and ivory were the primary high-value goods of this society. So salt was very important in this society. Salt was very important because in a desert, or in any hot or any climate really at this period of time, they didn't have refrigeration. So salt was a preservative for various kinds of meat and food. So gold, still valuable as a currency and as a metal. And ivory, which is from the tusks of elephants, couldn't be found anywhere else in the world pretty much, so it was very, very valuable and rare as a precious good. And these trading centers connected African kingdoms to Europe and the Mediterranean world. So already the Arabian Peninsula, the African kingdoms, and Europe were all connected on kind of this equal level playing field, and they became important economic and political centers, and eventually these trading centers become major cities. So you may have heard of Timbuktu. This is one of those major trading centers. So let's talk more specifically. The Kingdom of Ghana, who is an extremely wealthy empire located along the Niger River. And they really became a wealthy empire because they were in control of what is known as the gold-salt trade. So gold from West Africa was traded with salt from North Africa, again, across the Sahara, and it was controlled by the Soninke people of Ghana. 2/3 of the world's gold came from this West African trade. So they were a very, very wealthy empire because they controlled that trade. So if anybody all around the world wanted gold, basically, they would have to go through this empire. So they really had a monopoly on that trade. So Ghana's rulers converts to Islam in the 11th century. Islam was introduced to West Africa through trade, but most of the people remained animists, so the belief that all objects have spirits. And Ghana starts to decline as the gold-salt trade routes develop to the east. So other empires start to have more gold and salt, so they kind of get to compete with Ghana. And because the people were animists, but the ruler was Muslim, we kind of have that instability start to set in, and Ghana begins to decline. So basically what happens is the Kingdom of Mali takes over the Kingdom of Ghana and expands its territory even further. They continued to control the gold-salt trade, and they established Timbuktu as an economic and cultural center that attracted Muslim scholars and traders. People wanted to come here not only because it was a place of wealth, but because it was a place of learning. And the most famous ruler of ancient Mali was Mansa Musa, and he is said to be the richest man who has ever lived. He was the second Muslim in a row to rule Mali, and he strongly encouraged, but he did not force conversion to Islam. So many Malians still practice traditional animalism religions. He also emphasized trade, so he spread wealth throughout North Africa, and he brought back books and education from the Islamic scholars. If you're thinking about the same time period he's living is the same time as the Islamic Golden Age. So if he's traveling as part of his religious practices to Mecca or to Baghdad to learn more, he's taking that education and he's bringing that back to Timbuktu, and Timbuktu also becomes a center for learning. So our last empire that we're going to just breeze over today is the Songhai. So they were actually a kingdom that broke off from the declining Kingdom of Mali. They built up a strong army and extended the territory to the east. So now, remember, Mali was kind of over here before, Ghana was kind of just right here, and now Songhai kind of expands here. And they gained control of those same trade routes, which is kind of why they're a little bit of an awkward shape here. Instead of Timbuktu, Gao was the capital of their empire. And they had two basically important rulers. So they were a very short kingdom. They had a very short lifespan, I should say. So both of these important rulers were Muslims. Sunni Ali, who captured Timbuktu and basically conquered Mali, with his skilled military, he was really the first emperor of Songhai. So we can see now, after that discussion, that geography also reflects the religious diversity. So the primary faith, we have Islam, which spread to these territories through the north. So remember, there are people living up here, and there are people living down here at the time that we're talking about. So basically, through that trade, people spread it through Islam. This part of North Africa was actually part of the Islamic Empire, so the trade that happened here was definitely defined by religion. And then you'll learn next year a little bit more about this, or kind of at the end of this school year, Europe starts to colonize other places, and that's really how Christianity becomes sort of the dominant religion in the south. But there was also the oldest Christian religion, or Christian empire, is actually in East Africa, which is something that you maybe have learned about in world history in 7th grade. So here is our map that you can fill out. I will point out each of the countries as a reminder. Round 1 will be on physical features. Round 2 will include all of 20 of the countries on the list, and any of the above and beyond countries that you remember as well will be extra credit. So first we have Sudan. South Sudan is part of Sudan is actually not on either of those maps. Eritrea. Somalia is right on the coast of the Horn of Africa. Ethiopia. Egypt in the corner. Libya. Tunisia. Algeria. Morocco. Western Sahara. Mauritania. The actual country of Mali. Niger. Chad. Oh, Sudan's on there twice. You can cross that one off as well. Ghana. Togo. Benin. Nigeria. For the above and beyond, we have Kenya. Somalia is going to be regular credit. The Democratic Republic of the Congo. Angola. Where'd my clicker go? Here we go. Angola. Tanzania, right there. Mozambique, which is this one right here. So the green one is Mozambique. And Zambia right there. And then Botswana right above South Africa.